To Chicken in a Bag, a real-life comedy podcast designed to lighten you up, make you laugh, and get you off your ass. Now that's Kristen being Kristen. Are you freaking kidding me? Start the show!
What's up, everyone? It is Kristen being Kristen. It is episode 8 of Chicken in the Bag podcast. If you're new to the podcast, what this is we like to have a show every week that we have a conversation with different people, stir up different topics, and see what comes up. I'm really excited about today because it's a topic that I'm thrilled about is relationships. So I am going to have Coach Oriana Guevara on with us. Hello, Oriana. How are you?
Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm doing great, Kristen. Thank you so much for having me. Super fun to be here.
I'm so psyched that you're here because relationships is something that I love because it comes up so much as a bartender. And I really feel like so many people get into relationships with the wrong people. We have a lot of things that we kind of go through the same things over and over again. So I'm hoping that maybe you can bring some value to people today and maybe help them stop some of those bad habits they have, get into a little bit of how you got involved in coaching. So let's get a little bit of your backstory. Where are you from?
So I'm from Brooklyn. I'm first generation, born in the U.S. My mom's from Dominican Republic. My dad's from Colombia. And they met in Brooklyn, New York. They got married. They had a family. That's my sister and I. And I was raised here in Central Florida.
Oh, that's amazing. Fantastic. So now, relationship expert. Now, were you somebody that wasn't in the best relationships? How did you kind of stumble upon it? Did you just have that bad magnet or the shit magnet? Because some women do have that at a young age. So how did you get into relationships?
Oh, it's such a good question because I think a lot of people think like, oh, if you're a relationship coach or some kind of professional in the relationship sphere, you must have like great experiences in every relationship. And I'm like, no, I think for most people who get into the relationship space, it started off like the catalyst for the doing the work started with doing the work for yourself because something happened in your life that put you in the position to have to do the work on yourself.
Right.
And so I was in a relationship that was turbulent and toxic for a long time, started at a young age. I married that person, I divorced that person. And then it was like, what am I going to do now? And so I focused on myself and I focused on healing and I focused on, I never want to have that experience again. And how do I ensure that doesn't happen again? And all roads led back to myself. How do you make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, you make sure you take personal responsibility and ownership over everything that occurred so that you don't show up the same way in a future relationship.
I think that's such a great point. I think a lot of times we have a hard time looking in the mirror and looking at ourselves. And we had this conversation last week with my guest, Samantha. And it's kind of like, if you don't do the work on yourself and you have a bad habit or not the right tools in your toolbox, right? You're going to kind of get the same things coming to you. It's kind of like what you're going to draw to you. And I do believe, especially when it comes to like toxic relationships or bad partners, they can kind of pick up on the person that is the right fit for that. Whether if it's a violent relationship, a lot of times they can kind of see the type of person that they can kind of get because you have certain things. So I think working on yourself is such an important message. Another thing that I think is really important is I think a lot of women or people in general, they want to get in relationships at a very young age and you haven't really even found yourself. So I think that's a big trigger that I would love people to kind of wait a little bit and work on them first, because then I think you're more of a full person to add to somebody else's life. And I think that that's a big trap in society today. I don't know how you feel about that topic.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I teach when I teach relationship topics is if you want to attract high value relationships, the number one thing that you need to do, right? And so everybody's like, yes, I want to attract high value relationships. And, how do I do it? And, and I'm like, yes, that's great. Come into my class so that I can show you,
Right.
And then everything I teach is like, become a high value person, right? You want to attract high value relationships, become the man or the woman that high value individual would be attracted to. So I think one of the common things that people do is they say, I want somebody that's got this, and they got to make this much money, and they got to dress like this, and they have to have this personality and this attitude, and they've got their whole laundry list of things that they want. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. Do you have those things? And it's like, if you don't have those things, then where is the expectation coming from that you will be able to attract a partner into your life who not only has those things, but is going to be willing to share those parts of themselves with you? And if you don't have those things, what is the value that you're bringing into the relationship? And so I think there's a big mismatch in like relationship expectations and what people think is actually feasible and what people believe is the purpose of relationships, right? I think the purpose of relationships, I actually made a post about this on my Instagram today about the purpose of relationships being to co-create, right?
I saw that. I loved it because it's such an important message that people forget, is because they're like, oh, I want all these things. But it's like, I always think that it's great when you find that partner, like you said, that you can kind of co-create a life together, because that's the whole point of being in a relationship, is you're supposed to be bringing things to the table that you can each pick up and grow together. So I thought that was I love that. So that's great. I'll let you continue talking about that.
Yeah. So in the co-creation context of relationships, and when I say relationships, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about the full scope and context of every relationship. So it could be intimate and romantic relationships, but it's also friendships.
Right.
It's also potential business partnerships and associations. It's also familial relationships. Like, what is the value that you are willing and able, and what is your capacity to bring that value into that relationship? Many people kind of project out, and I've done it. I've been there too. We project out, and it's like, I want this out of my relationships. Like, that's great. What are you doing to get that? And are you showing up that way in your relationships? I wish my friends would reach out to me more. Are you reaching out to them? I wish that my partner would plan more special occasions. Are you planning special occasions? Are you making it known in your relationship that that's something that you find of value and that you desire?
Oh, I love that. I think it's so important because it goes to communication, like I always say, I think women especially, they think people are mind readers. They think that people can hear what they're saying and they're like, oh, I'm going to just do it because he magically knew that I wanted to do this. And I think that's such a trap that so many people don't. And I always say, if you don't, and two things I want to touch upon. I love the first thing you said, what do you bring into the relationship? Like the standards you have, and you having the same standards for yourself, like personally yourself, but also I think so many women don't know how to set the bar high for them, like high. So like if you don't request something from a partner, you're not going to receive that. If you allow somebody to do the minimum, they're going to do the minimum. If you say, no, you have to do the maximum, they will do the maximum. And then you'll grow with the right person. So I think that's one thing I think that was important, what you said. But second of all, I think that's so true. Saying what you want and giving what you want. You know what I mean? I think is a miscommunication that a lot of people don't realize. You can get a lot more if you're open about what you really want, and then because you have resentment, right? You don't say what you want, and then you get frustrated that they're not doing what you want them to do. And then it's a big cycle. So it's like, just say what you want. That would help.
Yeah. Resentment is the number one indicator that you, a person, not you personally, but that a person is not clearly communicating their boundaries in a relationship, and that their boundaries have been crossed, and that they've not asserted or communicated that their boundaries were crossed. That's when resentment occurs. Like, that's literally the recipe for resentment, right? Like, you don't like something, I do the thing, you don't tell me that you don't like that. So maybe either I keep doing it, or you just tell yourself a story in your head about how I must not respect you, and I must not like you, and I must not be a very good person, and how dare I, and I should know better, and we've been together long enough, I've known you long enough to not do that thing, right? Like, those are the stories that people are telling themselves in their marriages, their partnerships, their friendships, all of the time, Kristen. And they don't realize how they're creating their own suffering because of the stories that they're telling themselves.
I love that you said the stories that they're telling themselves, because I do have friends that I've had conversations with, and sometimes I really feel like we almost like have both sides of the conversation in our own head, and we decide what we think the other person's going to say or how the other person's going to react. We just decided for them. And I'm like, but you didn't even give the person the opportunity to have the conversation or figure it out. So I think that's something, like, let the conversation happen. Give the person the opportunity to find out how they feel about it, instead of saying, oh, well, he's not going to like that, or she's not going to like that, so I'm not even going to waste my time having the conversation. So
right. I think the other thing people do that is like absolutely disastrous, and I mean, you've just been on the planet long enough, or I'm sure you've seen this, if you haven't experienced this personally, is people get into relationships or they meet somebody that's a potential match, right? And then it's like, well, I'll tell you what you like when you tell me what I'll tell you what I like when you tell me what you like. Oh, I like that too. Oh, I want that too. Oh, yes, me too. Right. And then we start to like bend and fluctuate on our values. We start to compromise ourselves. We start to kind of like get into this space where it's like, I'm going to give up little bits and pieces of myself and what I really want in exchange for being in the relationship. And so you show up in the relationship as a false version of yourself. And so the relationship is doomed for disaster right from the beginning, because you're not even being honest about who the hell you are. You're not even being honest about who you are, much less what the hell you want out of the relationship. And then, time goes on, weeks, months, or years go by, and you can't help but to eventually, over time, people can't help but to, their natural self, their true self really starts to come to the surface. And then you start having all of these arguments and all of these blow-ups that are like, wait a minute, who are you? Like, I thought you liked that. I thought you were okay with this. Like, what's going on? Like, who have I been dating all this time?
That's a good point. I love that so much because I think so many people do that. And it's just because you want to be with somebody, so you want to like what they like at first. And it's such an important thing not to do, because you're not really being you. And then when you lose those little bits of yourself, and I think that's such an important thing that people just do in general in life to fit in, whether it be society, whether it be your partner, whether it be at your job. I mean, it's so important to hold on and just be your authentic self. And I think if you can just be yourself in the relationship, you're going to have such a stronger relationship, because you're having it with somebody as who you really want to be. I always say so many people will jump in a relationship quick too. And I think you have to take your time, because I feel like everybody wears a mask, not the mask that we're wearing right now, but like everybody pretends to be something. You don't really know somebody. It takes a little time for them to really like show who they really are, like you were saying. Like we bend to be like to fit into what they like or don't like. And then after you've been dating them for like 6 months to a year, like it starts to fall off because they can't keep it up. And I'm like, see, that's who the person really is. So such a great.
Or you start to see other indications of things that just don't add up, right? Like, oh yeah, I love family. And then like 6 months in, a year in, you've never met any of their family, right? That you don't see them actually having a relationship with their family. Like there's a disconnect there,
right?
I love sports, and every time that you invite them to do the thing with you that you like, they're like, oh, I got a lot of work to do. There's just mismatches that eventually that stuff is going to show up. And so like one of the things you said earlier was when people get into relationships too young, I did. I was 19 when I got into that relationship.
Right.
And it was 17 years. And so we very much like grew up together and grew up and apart as well, because like we didn't even know ourselves, much less like how to sustain a long-term relationship. And so we just became these two very different people than we were, when we were divorcing, than we were when we met, which makes sense, 17 years in, like we're adults now, we're two different people with very different hopes and dreams and aspirations and expectations for the relationship. And we couldn't merge that, that later on in the relationship, we could not.
I think one thing I also want to say about that, I want to touch upon that, like you were saying, liking sports, and they said, oh yeah, I love sports, and they don't want to play. I really think that goes back to too, like knowing who the person is when you're dating them. Like if there's a guy that likes to sit on the couch and watch football all day on Saturday and Sunday, that's probably who he is. I don't really think diamond ring, getting married, or having 3 kids is going to change that. That's just who he is. And I watch so many people that think like, oh, well, if I can just get him to marry me, then, he won't, we'll be so busy doing. And I just think that's such another trap that so many people do when it gets into like long-term relationships. You either have to kind of accept them for who they are, and that's what they like.
Yeah.
And I think so many people spend too much time thinking that they're going to change them. Yeah. And I think you have to kind of like, I either like the person for who they are, or I don't like them for who they are. And if I don't like them for who they are, I probably just have to get out of the relationship, because I think so many people get invested in time. Oh, we've been dating for 5 years. Oh, we've been dating for 8 years. I can't break with them now. We might as well just get married. Well, I think that's like such a trap to get married for that reason.
Yes, like I've already invested way too much time and energy, and so I may as well stay in it. Like that's called settling.
Yeah.
That's called settling, and millions of people do it all over the world, all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the question is that you? You know, is that what you deserve? Is that what you want? Do you want to settle? You know, and if so, like what's the story in your head that tells you that that's the best thing for you in your life for where you are? There's this expression that says that men get married hoping that she will never change, and women get married hoping that he will change.
Oh, I love that.
Have you heard that?
I've never heard that, but I just love that because
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, that's so funny. I do a lot of my comedy really goes around relationships, just because I watch so many people, like, you know, when you're in the bar and you watch a couple that's together, you're like, they should not be together. Or you just watch people come in and complain about their husband, or they complain about their wife or their girlfriend, and you always want to be like, what are you doing? Just open up a conversation or just move on. And it's so clear to me, but everybody else just has to, you know, just keep banging their head. And I do a joke about the type of women that you want to marry. And I always say, like, you got to look at like what she watches on TV. Like, you know, she watches this, she'll be a great housewife. The house we decorated for the damn holiday. You know, she watches this one, she'll be always want to get on Friday nights with her girlfriends. She's always, you know what I mean? So it's just funny that a lot of people don't realize that, and have to really think about your long-term goals. But I love that. That's a really great quote. I love that, Oriana.
Yeah. I mean, the more I work with people in relationships, and also like the more I self-examine my own experience. I mean, I am I'm about 3 years out of my divorce. So the more I self-examine, the more I reflect and learn, of course, because that's why I do the reflection and go back and look and think and, you know, whatever, is because I want to learn from it. But yeah, I could see that manifesting so much, in not only in my relationship, but in many others, where women think, oh, when he gets older, he's going to mature. When he gets older, he's going to be more responsible. He's going to be more mature. He's going to be more financially ready. I can see so much potential, right? And men are like, this is how I want her, the way she is right now, right? With like no expectation that like you change with age, you change as your priorities change, you change with life circumstances. Like people think people are like kind of fixed, you know, and in some ways we are, in terms of like our personality, but people's values and priorities change all of the time.
Right.
And values is something that is so fundamental to the success of a relationship, in any kind of relationship, right? Like it comes down to values alignment. And if you're not aligned in your values at all, like from the get-go, you're not just going to suddenly be aligned later on without doing a ton of work to actually get there. And you could do all of that work as a relationship, right? Work with a coach, work with a therapist, whatever, and still get to the point where you realize as a couple, oh, we're never going to align on these values. And then you still have to make a huge decision about whether or not, are we going to stay together despite the fact that these values don't align? Or like, is that a deal breaker for me? Is this, can I live with this or can I not live with this? Right. And there's certain things that, understandably so, like you're never going to be able to live with. Like for a great example that a lot of people make the mistake of thinking they'll change their mind is one person wants kids and the other one doesn't. And I think like, oh, you know, as time goes on, I'm sure they'll change their mind when they see that I'm a good wife or a good husband. No. Right. The way people spend and save money.
Yes.
Right? Oh, as time goes on, they will, you know, they'll become more financially responsible and we'll earn more and we'll this and we'll that financially. No. That is so fundamental to a person's upbringing and mindset that, again, unless you're doing that work as a couple and you're doing it individually to like change your mindset around money, change your mindset around abundance and spending and actually taking on healthy habits, not just as a person, but as a couple. And now within the context of a relationship, you're not going to be able to solve your money mismatch.
I think that is such a huge nugget that so many people misinterpret, like they just completely ignore it. And I say that because you can watch it sometimes, like you'll watch a couple and you'll just see like the wants that she has or the wants that he has. And it's kind of different. And I really feel like if you have two not good people with money, that's a disaster of a connection, because I mean, like, you know, money, like not having enough money causes so much anger, fights, and resentment, right? Like financial stress. I always say that to people. Like, I always say there's two things that people fight about. It's another joke. Man, I'm going to go back to my jokes because so much of my comedy was about this, because I find relationships so fascinating. There's always people fight about sex and money. So whether it be like, connection, like your love language, like how you express or how often you're intimate with each other. Like, I think that's what a lot of people have different needs, and that's an area that they really have a hard time saying. I need, like, they have a lot of people have a really hard time saying, being honest in the bedroom, right? And then the second one is the money. I mean, if there's not enough money to go around, the first thing you do is a lot of couples will go at each other instead of trying to come together and say, well, how can we fix it? And it's always, they'll fight over the money, they'll fight over the sex, they'll fight over the kids, and say, well, what are we doing wrong and how can we correct it? And I think that there's not enough, I don't really think there's enough training of people of how to have a relationship. Like, I think especially like people don't see healthy relationships, or maybe they came from single family homes, they didn't really have a partner, or they dated some bad people, they just go from one bad relationship to another bad relationship, or they carry the same relationship into the next relationship, which is such a bad trap.
Totally.
So I think that's so true, that a lot of people just don't have the right training sometimes, and you might have to grab a coach and say, hey, how can we fix this, or how can I fix me?
Yeah, I mean, I think the vast majority of people, they are relatively unconscious about how much work it actually takes to be in a what's called a healthy or a meaningful relationship with other people, and it's just kind of like, oh, you want to be my friend? Sure. Oh, business partner? Oh, yeah, you have this skill. Okay, cool. Let's do that. Oh, you're willing to invest this much money? Sure. Let's go in business together. And like, these are experiences that then later on we look at that other person and we're like, oh, they're such a this, they were such a that, but it's like, we never paused in the beginning to allow ourselves to actually select, like make an intentional selection of a friend or a partner within the context of business or romance, and say, like, is this person good for me based on their values and mine, right? Based on what they want out of life and what I want out of life, based on their lifestyle now and what their goals and dreams, and based on my lifestyle now and my goals and dreams, right?
Right.
I mean, it could be something as simple as like, one person desires a lifestyle in the mountains in a rural area, and the other person is city. Like, if you don't know that, just that conflict could bring a lot of grief and unhappiness into your relationship.
So true, so true. Oriana, one of the things I like that you did a quote about 5 things that women do to turn off men.
Oh yeah, I did.
I want to get into a little bit of women. I want to get a little bit into men, because my biggest problem is that I really feel like we're making men and women so against each other, which I don't really think benefits society, and I don't think it benefits relationships and healthy relationships. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what women do to turn off men, and I think that it's something that we sometimes don't realize we're doing. Do you want to talk about those 5 things?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll say as many as I can. Man, I know that the first one was emasculate.
Right.
Yeah, women emasculate men, and there's men and boys, right? And I really do believe that the emasculation of men is something that is just pervasive and prevalent in society. It's something that women, for the most part, don't even realize that they're doing it. And they don't understand what emasculation is, or what it means, or they think that men should just have to put up with that because they should be emotionally strong enough. And they don't understand that the impact that they have as a woman on a man's psyche or on a boy's psyche when they emasculate, either physically or through their words, by either verbal or physical disrespect of the male and the masculine. So the emasculation is a huge one, and it will send every man around you running away. So that is something that a lot of women do, particularly when they are in relationships and they're trying to avoid getting hurt. Believe it or not, like, a lot of people are out there dating. They have no damn business dating, because they're out there dating, and their intention, rather than the intention being like, my intention is to build a meaningful, loving relationship with this person, their intention is to avoid getting hurt. So if you're in a relationship and your intention is to avoid getting hurt, that means you're constantly protecting yourself and you have a shield up.
Yep.
Right. And so for the person that you're dating to actually get to know you, they literally have to like scale a fence and jump over it, in order to actually get on the other side, in order to get to know you. And for you, because you're under protection mode, you can tell that they're trying to scale the fence. And every time that happens, you feel threatened. Right. And
Yep.
it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why are you being so nice? What do you want?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's a young girl thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that nice guy is so boring. And then when you get older, you're like, damn, where are those nice guys at? You know what I mean?
I know, right?
Stuff, right?
100%. So, it's like if you're in a relationship and it's like your goal is to avoid getting hurt, please stop dating. Like you need to work on yourself. Take a break. Go love you. Learn how to do that. Learn how to receive love and care and support from a man so that you can actually appreciate the gifts of the masculine and enjoy them. Right? Like if you're a feminine woman, then you enjoy the gifts of the masculine. Yeah. The other thing that I mentioned was, when we take away a man's purpose.
Yes.
And the way that we take away a man's purpose is we do that by basically doing everything all of the time. Right? So men have certain strengths and they bring those strengths with them into a relationship. And that makes up part of the so-called package of what a man would have to offer to you, right? Particularly a high value male. And so when you show up, when we show up as women, particularly when women show up in their masculine, then they are in a place where they need to do. They need to do, and it has to be done her way. And even if he does it, if he doesn't do it her way, it's not going to be good enough in her perception. So what she does is that she might not let him do it at all, or she might let him do it, and then she's going to go back behind him and she's going to redo what he did because she needs it to be done her way.
Correct.
And so when we do that, we basically take away a man's purpose in the relationship. And when we take away his purpose, meaning we don't allow him to show up in his masculine strengths in the relationship, then what we're doing is we are basically saying, you're not going to be verbally saying it, but you're going to be saying it with your actions. You're going to be saying, I don't need you. And what you're doing or what you're capable of doing doesn't actually add value to the relationship or to my life. So please stop. And when we tell a man to please stop being masculine or please stop being who he is, he's not going to stick around very much longer because you took away his purpose.
Yeah. What else is he supposed to do? I love that I think that's so important because I think there's a miscommunication right now of being a strong woman. Like, yes, being a strong woman, yes, you can do a lot of things. I can do a lot of things. Like I can do a lot of shit. I grew up in a single family home with all women. So I do a lot of stuff. And when I met my husband, I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, you do that. Awesome. It's like, it doesn't have to be so exhausting. I think so many women don't know how to kind of like sometimes let somebody be a partner or let them help out. Doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you have a partner, that he's doing nice things, and it's okay. So I think that's a hard thing for a lot of women because they've been like, I can do it myself. And I think that becomes something you have to check as you get into a relationship because you want to have a partner. So they want to help too. They want to be part of it.
Right.
That's really
they do want to be part of it.
Yeah.
They do want to be part of it. And one of the things they want to be part of is parenting. Yeah. Right. And so when women show up and all of a sudden, like, it's all good when it was just us, but then now we had a baby and now it's like, get out of the way. You don't know how to do these things, Yeah. You're taking away his purpose as a father. And what I find oftentimes is that women who show up like this, they end up very resentful because then they're, on the back end, they're doing everything. They're absolutely exhausted. And then they're going, he doesn't do anything. Right. He doesn't this, he doesn't that. And I'm like, I wonder who taught him how to be like that.
That's a really great point because I think that's another thing that a lot of couples fight about, Oriana. I know when like I watch other couples that have children and I watch how I think I know so many men that are super involved and really helpful. And then my husband and I ourselves, there was just something that he was better at than I, as a mom, you're a little bit more sensitive and you're like, oh no, don't be tough on them or don't be, and my husband was a better reprimander.
Like disciplinarian.
Right. And like with my son, he had learning issues. I was really good with doing all the school stuff and going to the meetings and making the decisions. But my husband was really like, hey, you know what? That's your forte. I back you up, whatever you say. So sometimes we give and take. And I think so many people don't know how to give and take sometimes. It's like, I trust you. Whatever you think is the right decision, I back you up. Like, you make the decision because I understand that you know X, Y, Z on the situation. And I really will say, to my personal opinion, I think that's one of the reasons my son is such a really great combination, is because he's had some of the best qualities from both of us. And like, we back each other up on certain, instead of like fighting with each other. Oh, I don't like the way you're doing that. Then once a kid sees that, it causes such a problem in a marriage. So I think it is kind of important to kind of try to decide what is the position, and let's handle it up. When the kid goes down to bed, let's discuss how we want to handle the situation. I think a lot of couples goes back to communication. They don't communicate those things, and it makes it very
don't communicate, and they undermine each other in front of the children, which that's when your kids learn how to work each of you, to their advantage, when you undermine one another. Whereas if you show up in co-leadership as parents, or as just within the context of relationship, I always talk about co-leadership, right? Which means that, woman, you show up in your strengths, and, other partner shows up in his strengths as well. And when you kind of go about situations in life based on what your strengths are,
right?
Instead of just like strictly gender roles, or strictly like, I don't have time for this and you do. You show up in leadership based on what your strengths are. And that way it can be more balanced, But again, if you take away a person's opportunity to do that, for one, the relationship becomes super boring. Like, let's just be frank about it. It's fucking boring now. It's like, what am I doing here? I'm better off alone, or I'm better off single, because then at least I can have fun. The other thing that I mentioned in the video, 5 things women do that turns men off. And again, I mean, men do these things too, everybody, but this was just the context of the video. The other one was taking it personal and minimizing their emotions when men show up in their emotions. So guys, like, it could happen once, and he will never open up to you again, depending on how severe that experience was with you. And so you got to be really careful that, and it could be about in the context of anything. So one of the examples that I like to give is like when a man shows up in his emotions, and I'm sure you've seen this, Kristen, just because of the context of what you've told me about like the environments that you work in. When a guy shows up and he's pissed because his sports team lost. I'm sure you're familiar, right?
Oh, boo-hoo, Tom Brady didn't get a touchdown, right? Yeah.
Yes. And then we're like, what the hell is wrong with you? You're so stupid. That's so stupid. That's this. And we start to minimize, and we start to take it personal, and we just, just like, let him be. If he wants to be pissed because his team lost, let him be pissed. Like, just let him be pissed. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
If he wants to, if he's upset because of work, if he is in frustration, if he is in whatever the hell he is in his emotions, the moment that you take it personal, you are going to start struggling in that relationship, because, and also, I'm just gonna be blunt and say this.
Say it.
When you make another person's emotions about you by taking it personal, that's probably one of the most selfish ways that you could show up in a relationship. Like, back the hell up. This has nothing to do with you until it has something to do with you.
Right.
So if he's just in his emotions, he's frustrated about work, he's stressed out, he's mad his team lost, he lost money in the stock market. Could you just let him be with his emotions? And you don't have to judge them, because he's probably judging his own emotions way more harshly than you are. And he doesn't need the woman that he loves adding to it.
Right.
So the best thing you could do is probably ask him if he needs personal space or quiet time, or what he actually needs or wants, if you want to be in support. And again, we're assuming that he's not showing up in his emotions in a way that's like literally directly detrimental to you and harmful to you, obviously. So if he's not doing that, ask him what he needs. Like, do you need space? Do you need time? You want to be alone? Like, do you want to leave the house? Would you like me to leave the house? Like, whatever the hell it is, like, just let him be with his feelings.
I think this is such an important message, because I totally do the same thing. Because I really think sometimes it goes down to your partner has a communication style. Some women are quiet or talkative. Some women are emotional. Same with men. Some men get blown up for like the dumbest things. Like, and that's one thing I've always done with my husband. I know my husband. I know his temperament. I know when he's having a bad day just by the way he looks when he walks in the door. It's not my fault. I'm not going to get my panties in a bunch and start fighting with him about it. He had a bad day. I give him his space. I let him shake it off. And a little while later, I'll come and say, hey, I'm sorry I came in such a bad mood. Had a tough day. I'm like, what's up? Do you want to talk about it? And that's how we do, because, you know, you can worry about, oh, why is he such a, you know, I'm like, I was having one of those days. Oh God, you know, like I'll joke with him, but I just let him be. I think if you could be a little bit more understanding that your partner, you know, communicates. And I think if you've been with somebody for a long time, if you don't know how your partner communicates, then shit, you better like learn who your partner is. I mean, come on.
Right.
We've been together after 2 years. If you don't know that sports means a lot to them and it's not going to be the right night to go out with another couple if he had a bad day, you know, whether he bets or does a stock market or his teams in the playoffs, you know, it seems stupid to you, but it's something that's important to them. If you love them, you understand it's important to them. You know, just like if you missed a sale or you know, your girls went someplace and left you out, you're going to be, your nose is going to be all twisted and he's going to be like, okay, you know, so you got to be, it's called having a little bit of compassion or understanding for your partner.
Yes,
you know?
It is having compassion, right? And it is having some understanding that sometimes people do need space. Sometimes he's going to want to talk about it. Sometimes he's not. Right. You could just ask and not show up with an expectation or an assumption of like, well, why don't you talk to me about it? Like, no, that's not going to help him show up in an emotional space, vulnerable around you again in the future. And then the other thing is when women show up at that point in time needy, and it's like, are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? You know, like, it's not about you.
About him.
Until it is about you. Right. And then you act accordingly.
I think I love that, you know, because I think, you know, it's just, if you want to be in a relationship and you want to be healthy, you know, you have to kind of look for what you want in your partner. You have to kind of know, but you have to bring I think some of the things we've been talking about throughout today is bringing what you want to the relationship to receive. So it's almost like a mirror. What you're bringing to the table is what you're hoping to receive back, you know, and if you're doing the right work, hopefully you're picking a partner that will kind of give to you what you're giving to them. In my opinion, that's what I try. Like my husband and I are a team, and you know, we've had tough times and hard things, but we've never tried to take it out on each other. You know, we try to say, okay, that was a tough situation. How can we learn from it? What are we going to do? So I think that's really important about trying to get to understand who the other person is, not making it always about you in a relationship. I have another topic I want to get into today. Are you there? Did you freeze? Did I lose you? Oh no, you're frozen. Oh, I wanted to get into a very good topic. Don't tell me. Let's see. Let's see if Oriana can join back in. I just lost Oriana. We were going to get into something I really want to get into. I hope everybody is enjoying today. Let's see if we can get, I don't know. This has never happened to me before. So I will see if Oriana gets back in here. I don't know if anybody is watching, if you have any questions, anything you want to ask, if I get Oriana back in here. We will see what is going on. I don't know how everybody else is feeling about relationships. Some of the things that I think is so important in relationship, like Oriana was saying, was communication, teamwork, not bringing your past into your new relationship. I think I see so many people that do that all the time. And I think that is such a really bad trap that so many people do. What else is the thing? I love that she was talking about self-mastery. I think it is so important to, you know who you are and work on yourself instead of, you know, like expecting somebody to fix you. I think that's what's such an important thing. So many people think that another person is going to fix them or fill their void or their need. And I think that doesn't happen unless you actually fix yourself first. So I think that's very important. Let's see. All right, let's see what else. My God, I like the fact that she was talking about that. I think also, let's see what else. Burnout, toxic men. I want to talk about, if she got back in here, I really want to talk about toxic men, because I think there's so much discussion about toxic men. But I also think that I have seen like toxicity on both sides, and I don't really think we talk enough about that sometimes. And I think that is a very interesting thing. And I don't know how everybody else feels about that. But I think that is something that needs to be talked a little bit more because I think there's toxicity on both sides. And I think that we don't really empower men by tearing them down or empower women by saying one is wrong or one is right. I'd like to see a little bit more equalness on that. So that's something I think is pretty interesting. Let's see. Anybody else have any questions? So I think we lost Oriana, and I'm super bummed about that because I really want to get into so many more of these topics and hear more about relationship advice. Some of the things that I think are really, to me, for what works for my relationship is I've been married for over 22 years, and I've been with my husband since I was 25. And like going back to talking about growing together, that is something that, you know, we've actually grown up together, and we have had to learn to like change, and sometimes we have different interests and things like that, and we've grown with each other. And you know, we try to be supportive of each other's choices and new decisions. I think parenting adds a whole new dynamic to relationships. So I think you sometimes have to kind of learn to be a little bit more. You have to work a little bit harder when the children come along, and that's something that we really worked at. Like, you have to find your time, and it's got to be about the kids, but it's also got to be about you. And I think a lot of people, it just becomes all about the kids, and they miss each other. So that's something else. God, I'm so bummed that we lost Ariana's connection, because I really wanted to finish some of this. I might have to do a second episode with her, because I think that we have a lot more to talk about. So I might just end the show early today and see if we can reschedule this. And unless anybody else has any other questions. Anybody else? Let's see. I'm just going to go to some messages right here. Back to early in the show, Dylan said collaborative work between a husband and wife is a necessity. I completely agree about that. I think that that's part of a relationship, is teamwork. I have actually a really a poem that I love. You can use it for a relationship, or you can use it for a marriage. And it will say that a lot of times, that whether you call it the relationship box or the marriage box, you always think that it's a box that's full of all this great stuff. And in reality, it's an empty box we put the things into, and you can't take out what you're not putting into it. So I think that's a really great message for people that I'll wrap up the show with that. And then, so I will let you guys know if I do a redo with Oriana. Maybe we'll do a part 2 and get into the rest of some other topics that I wanted to get into. And I'm going to thank you guys for joining, listening, and watching. And let's see, I just want to make sure she's not in here. All right. So I'm going to thank you guys for tuning in and watching today. Let's see. Oh, she's reconnecting, she says. Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah, she is. Oh, yay. All right, Oriana. Sorry. What happened before. So I'm glad you got back, because I'm like, let's talk about a couple things, because I really want to get into toxic men and women.
Yeah. Now I actually have better video too.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, so much better. So that's fantastic. All right. So we're going to pick up where we got lost for a second. So what we were saying, we're talking about the things that women do that turn off men. But I was saying, one of the things that I think is so interesting about today's society is a lot of talk about toxic men and women.
Yeah.
And I think that we talk about the men being toxic all the time, but we don't ever talk about that sometimes it can be on either side. And I really was saying that I don't think there's enough balance going on anymore. And I know that a lot of the work that you do, you have a book coming out called The Brave New Masculine. So I want to kind of get into like what made you want to work with men? What do you think about the toxic men issue? And what made you want to work with men? And I think you said it's because it helps women and men have a better relationship all over. That's how it fixes the situation. So get into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm really passionate about working with men's health and healing, men's personal growth work. I spent quite a long time working on a college campus. And in that setting, I did I have about 9 years of diversity and inclusion work, but really specifically about 4 years in gender equity under Title IX, which is gender equity in educational programs. But also within that context, my role specifically was overseeing institutional oversight over issues of sexual misconduct and sexual violence, which actually falls under Title IX and gender equity when it comes to the college campus setting, and Title VII in the employment setting. So I saw a lot of stuff that was like, wow, this is super traumatizing and super unfair, and like just on all sides, like nobody wins. Everybody comes out of that situation feeling like they lost, and there was a lot about that experience that I just thought, man, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a different way to handle these situations. There's got to be a different way to educate people about why this matters, and how to stop violence, and how to stop misunderstandings that like literally start off as a communication mishap, like a miscommunication, and end up in something that really, really, really harms somebody, like long-term harm. So in that process, I actually found myself going like, man, where are the men? Are there any men who can qualified to have this conversation? And I just totally disqualified myself from having that meaningful conversations about men's health and men's, sexuality and consent and intimate relationships with women. Like I did that, but like kind of on the surface level, because I thought, well, I'm not a man, so I can't really have that conversation well, And I think it was probably around close to this time last year that I felt this like almost like a spiritual epiphany that was like, wait a minute, you know what? Like I can have this conversation with men from my perspective as a feminine woman. And that is my goal, right? I'm not trying to educate men how to be men, because I don't have that lived experience, and I'm not trying to pretend that I do or that I am. But I can educate men on how to have more successful relationships with feminine women, and what it is that they can do to have better communication with the women in their lives. And again, I'm not even just talking in my book about the romantic context. I mean, women in the workplace setting. Their daughters, right? Like my relationship with my dad has been pivotal to my not only my upbringing, but my entire life and the way that I show up in relationships with men. So men should have an opportunity to learn, like, how do you show up for a daughter in a powerful and positive way? How do you show up in your relationship with your mom? Like, how do you heal your relationship with your mom as a grown man, adult, right? Like, if you have a broken relationship with your mom as an adult male, you are probably experiencing very difficult relationships with women in the romantic setting. And that is something that you must heal in order to show up, again, more powerfully, more masculine, and in your as an empowered man and a high value man, if you want to attract a high value feminine woman. Now that context, Kristen, I can talk about, right? Like that context I know about.
I think that's so important, because I think that's what we're missing so much. Like, I think that, I think there is such a value, like, to what if like you were saying with the father and the daughter, you know what I mean? It's a very important relationship. It's a lot of times young women's first experience with the man, or what they're looking for. Some girls want to emulate their relationship with their dad, and some girls want a guy that's nothing like their dad. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that a lot of times, like you were saying, like that's such a true point. Men that don't have a good relationship with their mom, a lot of times have a really hard time being a good boyfriend, husband, or father, because, I just think your childhood really teaches you so many things, and whether you want the same or you want better. Right. And I think that's so interesting. So I think that's a really important thing, because I think if we can't complain, right? To me, complaining about men or complaining about women, I don't think that really gets anybody anywhere. It's like, how do we change the dialogue? How do we fix the situation so it doesn't continue? And I think that's what we do a lot of times in society. We'll get rid of something, or we'll change something, but we don't really give the tools, the techniques, or the conversation to really change it for the long term.
Oh, entirely. Well, and just think about the context of complaining. Like, where does that come from? If you think about like what your mindset is when you're complaining, you are disempowered, right? Meaning you have no power. Is that how you want to show up as a man or woman in a relationship with no power? I mean, you're going to literally attract somebody who thrives off taking advantage of people with no power.
Right.
So that's where you end up attracting. If you're complaining, you're probably in some realm of a victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? Why are all women this way? Why are all men this way? Why is everybody I get into a relationship leave me? Why does everybody, right? Like, you're using absolute statements like never, always, everyone. And that's, you're victimizing yourself, and you literally make yourself a target for people who thrive off victimizing others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know people don't like to hear that. And I'm not blaming the victim. Like, I'm not
No.
blaming people who are mistreated in relationships. As I said, I was in a turbulent and toxic relationship for 17 years. But I also know that, for one, thank God, today I am a completely different person. I am not that
Mhm.
woman anymore. I'm not that woman because I did the work to make sure I would never be her
Be that.
anymore, and that I grew the fuck up and I healed, right?
Mhm.
And number three, like, I also know that I showed up disempowered in that relationship, and that gave another person the opportunity to take advantage of that, right? It was actually, with all due respect to my younger self, it was actually a perfect match, right?
Yeah.
I showed up as a disempowered woman, and that gave him the opportunity to show up as a person who could take advantage of that. And
Right.
that was a match, energetically speaking. That
Yeah.
was not, I'm not putting a judgment on it about whether it was a good match or a bad match. I'm just
Right.
saying that matched up energetically, and that's how I manifested that experience in my life, and that's how he also manifested the experience in his life, right? It was an energetic match.
Right.
I don't want to be an energetic match to that
Right.
ever again, which
No.
is why I did the work to ensure that I never would be. And now I help other people also make sure that they will never be an energetic match to mistreatment and abuse and disrespect and other types of behaviors that are toxic and that don't add value to the relationship experience.
I completely agree, because I think toxicity in general, just like, I mean, I think there's toxic girlfriends. Like, you have
Yes.
relationships that are very toxic. You see it with way women are like, they want to get on the phone. They just really want to tear the other one down because it's a competitive thing. I just think that toxicity in general, you don't want toxic people in your life, men, women, coworkers, whatever. And I think
Yeah.
it's funny, I think what is so important that you're empowering the conversation with men. Like, my son is 17 and such a gentleman and such an old school way of a boy. And it makes me proud as a woman and as a mom to see such a young man who is respectful to women, that knows how to be polite and is such a good human. And I think that's what it goes down to. It's like, you don't tell somebody that they're a bad at, like that's nasty how they're speaking to another person, or you don't give them the tools. And I really believe scripting is so important with young people.
Yeah.
Like, if you give young kids the right words, they can correct the problem, and then you stop the problem from creating. Like, I think when you get into high school or college, and I think that's what's so confusing about society right now, because we give so much, this is powerful, but this isn't. But you're not really giving them the real of what the power is. The power is being able to use your voice and know what's right or wrong, how to be treated, not to lower the bar and be like, well, I can do it too. That's, to me, isn't the right message for young people.
Right.
Oh, this song can come out and he can say this and I can say this too. To me, I think that's such a missed message for a lot of young women, because you're lowering your bar. You want to raise your bar. Like, I really want to say those words because I want to attract a person that's up there with me. So I think that's
absolutely.
So
yeah. I think you want to raise the bar, and you want to do that with the proper standards and requirements. But you need the proper self-worth. Like, you need a high level of self-worth. You have to have self-esteem to do that. You have to like, know that you deserve that and place that level of value on yourself. And again, this is another reason that people manifest relationships that are toxic and turbulent and even abusive, is because they don't believe that they are worth more. They don't believe that they deserve better, right? And so when you have an abuser telling you nobody will ever love you the way I do, right? Like, that person who is in that situation thinks, oh wow, they could be right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy, because I've had friends, I know people that have been in really, really bad relationships like that. And it just hurts you to see the person that's like kind of stuck, and I think that's what is so important, to really try to get proactive on the lower level. Like, what is important? How should you be spoken to? How would you want to be? I think it's so important for all those little things. And I think if you've come from a toxic background or abusive background, it's prone that you're going to probably repeat the cycle, because it unfortunately it's what you know, right? And we're comfortable with what we know. We're not comfortable with what we don't know. So that's why a lot of times, bad relationships or bad behavior feels more comfortable to us, because that's how we equate love.
Right. So, or that's what you saw between your parents.
Right.
In most cases, you saw that at home with your parents or your caregivers. You saw them verbally disrespect one another. You saw maybe even worse than that, right? And so a person's perception is that that's so-called normal, right? That's how people treat one another. And that's why it's so critical not to engage in those behaviors as parents or as a couple in front of your kids, or not to allow kids to, really get wind of those like toxic types of ways of going about conflict. You can let children witness healthy ways of resolving conflict, and they'll learn that.
Yeah,
but if you let them see unhealthy ways to resolve conflict, they'll just think that that's the norm in relationships, and then they'll either let somebody, when they grow up and they get into a relationship, they will let somebody treat them like that, or they will be the person that treats people that way. So most people will either default to being like their mom was or like their dad was. And especially I would say, like, if you're now as an adult and your whole like relationship sphere revolves around trying not to show up like one of your parents or caregivers, like I'll never be my dad or I'll never be my mom, like you're headed right in that direction. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're probably going right in the direction that you don't want to be going in, because you are placing your focused attention and your energy on what you don't want rather than on what you do want. And when where our attention goes, that's where our energy flows, and that's what we end up bringing into life and reality.
Yeah, I think that's great, because I always try to say that to people. Like, I believe like what you put out, what is what you want. Like, like make a list, and it's like, sometimes I'm just like, if you're kind of got out of a relationship, I'm like, take your time. You have to go through your process of, because if you jump right back in, you're probably going to take your past relationship into a new relationship. Because I always say people, wind up dating the same person, different job, different phase. I say that all the time, but you kind of have a type. And until you really do that self-work that you said, looking yourself in the mirror and figuring out what you want and what you don't want, and what kind of person you want to attract you, like you'll kind of repeat it sometimes over and over again. And it's like, then you think that's just all you're going to get, or that's all you're worthy of, because you keep repeating it.
Right.
So I think that's so important. And I think it is, like what you said, is so important to kind of help people learn how to communicate. And I think that's what we don't spend enough time in. We'll point out all the bad behavior that's going on in the world, or we'll say, oh, this is awful, but how do we train people not to keep doing it? Or how do we open up the dialogue of teaching people how to be respectful? I think that it's great to kind of, practice it with kids sometimes, or even in the workforce. I think as a woman sometimes, I think sometimes you have to learn how to use your mouth in an assertive way. And also kind of like, I think with bullies or bad behavior, I think one way that works really well is being assertive and using your words. And I think it lets people kind of know, again, oh, this is the boundary, or this is where I shouldn't say that to that person. Because some people just don't know that that's not what you're supposed to say, or that's bad, but they need someone that says, hey, that's not cool, and then sometimes like, oh shit, it might be the wake up call that somebody needs, or it might make another person go back and look at themselves like, oh, I better check out why I did that, or I didn't realize that was offensive, so
yes,
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say, like, people will treat you how you allow them, and you're responsible for teaching people how to treat you, and we do that with our boundaries. Boundaries are for you. They're not for other people. They're for yourself, right? So you design and you determine and dictate, like, where are my boundaries? I don't want to be spoken to in this way. I don't want to be touched in these ways. I don't want to be in these types of situations, right? And you decide what is okay and what is not okay for you, and what those contexts look like as much as you can. And so, because we can't anticipate everything under the sun, you might still find yourself in a situation that's like, whoa, wait a minute, but like your intuition, like there's something inside of you that tells you, like, like you felt an ouch, like, I didn't like that, or something's wrong here, something's not right, something doesn't feel good, I don't know what it is, right? Like, that most likely means that somebody crossed your boundary. And that's something that you should communicate to them, particularly if you have an interest in staying in relationship with that person. I would say always communicate, like don't, I'm not a fan of ghosting. I don't recommend that people ghost. I know a lot of people will have these weird or awkward encounters and then they just ghost rather than communicating. But, it's if you can find it in yourself to not ghost, right, and just take personal responsibility over the way that you want to be treated, it's actually really good practice for you to communicate with people, even if you're ending the relationship. Communicate to them like, I don't want to engage in this relationship anymore, and here's why. Or I didn't appreciate when you said X or when you did X. Communication is a skill. It's a skill, just like any skill. Let's say if I wanted to learn how to be a seamstress, right? Sewing is a skill. But I can't just sew one time or sew one item and think like, now I'm a professional seamstress, right? Like it takes practice because it's a skill. So I'll tell people, my clients who are getting into the place where they're ready to date, like don't just cut off people and not communicate with them that you're cutting them off or why you're cutting them off. Like actually say like, hey, I'm going to choose to end this relationship, or I'm going to choose to end this date. And this is the reason why. Thank you anyway, and it's really good practice because you've got to learn the communication skills, but then you also have to practice them, because when you get into those situations that are emotionally charged and the stakes are high, potentially, you don't just want to have the communication skill. You want to have the skill that you practiced, because otherwise your fear can still take over and the emotional charge can take over. And then what happens, Kristen, we fall back into our default, and your default communication might be yelling. It might be name calling. It might be whatever the heck you saw growing up. It might be ghosting. It might be just like storming out. And these are not productive communication skills when you're in a relationship, particularly a relationship that either you don't want to end or you can't end. I've had a relationship with my mom that's been struggled over years. Now it's 1,000 times better because I've worked on it, and I've set boundaries and things like that, and I've actually talked to her about it. But before, it was just me expecting her to know what my boundaries are and never cross them without me saying anything. And then an emotionally charged situation would happen, and we would clash. And it's like, well, no shit. Of course that's going to happen.
So that's such an important thing, because I think there's two things about that. Like you said, communication is a skill set. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. Also, I think if you want to end a relationship or something comes to an end, you're giving that person maybe some feedback that they need. It's not always easy. I see so many people. I'm such a believer with direct communication. I know it's so hard. I know the truth hurts, and I know it's not always the easiest thing. But for me, I have to. I just let it out, and then at least the person knows. Like, I'm completely honest. I'm like, hey, listen, leaving this job for XYZ, or hey, I'm not really cool with the way you overstep that boundary. I'm gonna still like be around you, but probably won't be around you as often as because the other person has to realize that they did the wrong, because they can't correct their behavior or realize they have a problem if someone's not bringing it to their attention. It might just be their personality and they've never known. I know that my husband didn't let me know sometimes when I'm being too blunt. He'll be like, whoa, hey, you're really sometimes, and I don't realize it a lot sometimes. So it's nice to have that person that can kind of like, check me once in a while. I'm like, hey, did you realize you just said this? And I'm like, oh shit, did I say that? Because sometimes so we all can work on ourselves a little bit. We all have our own little things that we're trying to correct. And
I tell people, because I know some things are hard to say, especially in relationships, and especially when it comes to certain things about the relationships, like money and intimacy and things like that. But if you set the intention that the message you want to get across, you're going to get it across, and you're going to do it with love and compassion and empathy, right? Like, this isn't about like, this is just how I talk and take it or leave it, and I'm going to punch you in the face with my words, no. That's not what I'm talking about. This isn't like, it's not about getting your message across and bulldozing somebody.
Right.
It's about getting your message across in a way that allows you to get what you want as a result, right? And so if you go about your communication, I truly believe you can say anything to anyone if you say it with love and compassion and empathy, and if you do it at the right time, you can get your message across. So that's like, you probably don't want to talk about certain things that are emotionally charged when you guys are driving. You probably don't want to get in front of the television that somebody's intently watching, or in front of some other, thing that they're doing on the computer to have an emotionally charged conversation. Right. Like, come on, like, this isn't about you getting heard right here, right now, no matter what. We got to talk about this. Like, that's not a communication skill.
Yeah.
That's going to get you very far, especially with a person who's less assertive than you are. Right. So understanding, like, in partnerships, oftentimes we will attract a partner, or you just in the work setting, you'll end up working with somebody who is just different than you are. So like you were saying, Kristen, like, you're very comfortable with direct communication and being assertive. But if you approach a person who is less assertive with that same energy and just assume that they're just like you, they're going to shut down.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, whatever you say will come across so forceful and so fast that they won't have any other choice than to back down and shut down and possibly even remain silent, because they need time to process that.
Right.
And in the meantime, the more assertive person is like, why you're not responding? Because you don't respect me, and it's like, okay, hold on, time out, everybody.
Yep.
This isn't the way this works. This is a skill. You've got to understand who you're talking to. You got to understand your own communication style. And more than anything, you have to lean in with empathy and compassion. And with love. I believe you don't have to, it doesn't have to be romantic in order to love someone, just with love. Like, how would you want somebody to talk to you?
Love the situation. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing just in life in general. And I definitely think of relationships. You watch so many couples that just don't communicate effectively. It's just like they're trying to be teams or keep track. And I'm like, oh my God. Like not team, like team is what you want to be, but like keeping score. I hate couples.
The relationship scorecard. Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad. I'm like, I did this to say, like, I look at some couples and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you have like a whole chart, like how you do things. I'm like, I'm like, wow, I don't know. Like, I can't even, I guess people do what they have to do, but then I think sometimes it takes a little bit away. Like, it makes it almost like a job. You want your relationship to kind of like, and another thing I always say to people all the time, the world is tough out there. Your job is tough. Your traffic's tough. The life is tough. When you got to come home, I think that your home has to be kind of your sanctuary, in my personal opinion. They just close the door and have to already fight you. Like I just really feel like you have to try to make a conscious effort to try to say, hey, this is our safe place. This is our home. Like, we can say what we want to say here. We can do what we got to do here. But like, let's try to be collaborative and like positive, like you were saying, like, all right, there's an issue we have to talk about. Hey, if you have a moment, can we make time to talk? Blah, blah, blah. I always say, like, not everybody can, like you were saying, direct communication. Not everybody can process information if you sit and talk to them. Some people really need things written down and maybe let them be able to look at it. Like, some people's attention spans might not, you might be talking and they're not really listening and hearing what you're saying. They might just be kind of like zoning out. So I think that it's really important for you to kind of work on trying to find the best communication style that works for your relationship.
Yeah. Well, and like, if we're talking about the context of a family member, an employment setting, right? Maybe your employee or your boss, or if it's your romantic partner, ask them, like, hey, when I have a difficult topic I'd like to talk about, how would you like me to approach you? Would you, would you like me to tell you a day or two in advance, or, one of the things that one of my coaches recommends and that they practice in their relationship is she'll say, hey, on our walk this weekend, or, like, whatever day it is during the week, like, hey, like she tells him, like, later on this weekend, can we talk about such and such, right? And because she's the more assertive person in the relationship, and he needs more time to process. So she's like giving him a heads up, so you don't have to make it something that's so kind of like, we're going to have a family meeting and here is the agenda, right? You don't have to be that rigid unless that works for your relationship, and do it, Some relationships really thrive on the family meeting, and I recommend it for those that do. But sometimes it could just be as simple as like, today's Thursday. Hey, this weekend on Saturday when we're out hiking, can we talk about this XYZ?
Mm-hmm.
And it gives your partner time to get mentally prepared for the conversation, so that when you bring it up, it isn't like, why are you bringing that up right now?
Right.
What triggered that? Why is this a conversation at this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not like, you start to play off of that. One person starts to get defensive, things like that offense, defense, and next thing you know, your night is ruined.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of couples live in a reactive state instead of a proactive state. Like, I think if you can kind of say, these are some of the things that we're working towards, or these are the things that I don't like, these are the things we want to work on, instead of just always in a reaction mode, you didn't really solve anything. You just constantly have the same fight over and over again. And I'm like, well, it's just doesn't really get you guys anywhere. You just feel like you're just spinning, and then you go into that zone that you said, which is like a bad way to communicate. So yeah, understandable. Right.
Yeah,
so
and it's not hard to get stuck in that cycle too, because then
100%.
It's like, well, now we had the argument, and then resolving the argument could be another argument, so we're just going to avoid any conversation about that thing.
Which so many people do, avoiding.
So
it's just like not good. Well, Oriana, I really appreciate you joining us today, and just
thank you.
So much great information. So when is the book out?
The book should be out sometime this summer, potentially early fall, like once I, get it through editing, get everything nice and ready to go. I'm excited. The book has a publisher already, has a title, has a cover, has a lot of different components to it. But it's taken time to prep the book, because I really want to make sure that I'm thorough and that I am really doing the conversation justice, because there are not a lot of women, particularly women from the feminine woman's perspective, taking this particular like taking on this movement, if you will, which is, to support men's health and healing, from the perspective that when we do that as women, it benefits women and children.
It does.
At the end of the day,
if you fix men or give them the right tools, they're going to be a better representation, right? Yeah. And then women are going to have a better partner, a better husband, a better father, friend, coworker, right? It all goes intertwined. Instead of saying, "Oh, they suck," you know what I mean? Or you're doing something that's proactive and hopefully changing the ripple effects out. So I think it's really important work, and I appreciate that. I think it's important.
Thank you.
You got to work collaboratively. You can't just sit there and be like,
Yeah, when you think about men's health, though, I think it's one of the conversations that's minimized the most in society. I think people have this perception that men have it better off than any other group in society, and the fact of the matter is that the percentage of men who struggle with mental health problems is the highest out of any group.
Yep.
The percentage of men who commit, men and boys who commit suicide is the highest out of every group. The percentage of men and boys who die in the workplace setting from workplace accidents is also the highest out of any other group, and et cetera, all the way down the line. So, to continue to tell ourselves as a society that, women are in a group of people that are so extraordinarily oppressed, that that oppression is occurring by men and at their hand exclusively, and that they deserve no support, really is doing our children and our future a complete disservice. And so, again, I'm that passionate about it. I'm that willing to take a stand for it. I love men, and I want to support men's health and healing. I want them to be able to show up fully as fathers in the lives of their children, and as husbands in the lives of the women that they love, and they need support to do that. And there are protectors. And quite frankly, there's never been any civilization in the history of humanity who's ever survived without strong men.
Yeah,
So,
I
you
love that
know,
you say that, because I think that there's, I always say I'm a strong woman, but I want a strong man. And that's what I love about, my husband,
yeah,
because he is a well-rounded man. He's a strong man. He's a hard worker, but he's also has a sensitive side. He's caring, he's loving, he's all those things. And I think there are a lot of men out there that are like that. And I think
yes,
just group them into one category and just say, oh, I'm like, it's such a disservice to all the amazing men that are out there that are good husbands and good fathers and good coworkers and doing the right thing. So I think it's so important. I think I am glad that you're doing that, because there is a miscommunication a lot of times about that, and I don't think a lot of people do know those statistics. And so I appreciate that, and I always say, like, I think you can be a strong woman and still like men, and I think that was more of the message in society, because I always say, being a bartender and working in a bar and waiting on so many men, I have so many great men as customers and owners and that I experience. So I'm like, there's a lot of good ones out there. I don't want to just put everybody into one box and just throw them, in the back, so I think that's really important, Oriana. And I hope I hope that the message gets out there to a lot more people, and it starts a dialogue. And I think it is for us to work, as a team. I think that, we can all be strong, and we can all build a good world together. It doesn't have to be. And I think if we constantly say that boys are bad or men are bad, it's a really bad message to the young boys that are out there, because they're not they didn't do anything yet. They're little. Why should they be told that they're bad when they're only 3 years old? And how are they going to be a good man if they already think that they're bad at 2? So I just really think that people have to be a little bit more conscious of, like, it's up to you as a parent to raise a good boy and a good girl. And I go back to the dialogue, like we said, when you see a situation at the playground or at home and they're not being nice to their sister, you open up that dialogue and say, what did you think why would you do that? Or do you understand why we don't put our hands on each other? Right. I think we have to get back to basics a little bit. And I think
I agree.
The more you teach younger boys, and the more you have conversations with boys in high school, we don't have to tell them that you just say, this is how you should do something, or this is how I think the more you teach, the better.
Yeah. I mean, imagine growing up being told, like, the very nature of you, like, your masculine nature is wrong, is bad, is dangerous, even, right? Is wild, is out of control, is too much. Like, it causes major psychological problems, and it causes gender confusion. And so now these boys become men. And, are we really going to sit here and say we don't understand why men have the highest rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, and psychological, concerns? Like, really?
Yeah.
Are we really going to sit here and continue to say that we don't understand as women why men aren't able to show up powerfully in their relationships when they've been emasculated and told that their masculinity is wrong their entire lives? I'm sorry, but enough of the bullshit already.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because I mean I feel the same. I think that I don't understand. It's mind blowing to me, because I don't even know how to explain it, because sometimes I look at it and I'm like, I don't understand why it's bad, because there's a skill set that men bring, and that women, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of both. And then when you see, and then I think that you're teaching women that, they think that being a powerful woman is being mean and like hateful, and like that isn't what being a woman is either. So I think I completely see how it's getting so mismatched, and I'm like, no. Like, you can be strong, you can be a woman, you can also have, a masculine side, and you can be a strong man and still have a little bit of a feminine side with certain things. And I think you can be a little bit of both, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And to say one is bad and one is good, it's just, that's such a mismessage to people in general.
Right. And we all do. We all have masculine and feminine, not just qualities, but energies as well. And we all kind of oscillate in and out of masculine and feminine energies all of the time. And we need to, to be able to do that. And learn how to do that well, but learn how to do that from like a place that's powerful and empowered. Like, this is like, when I'm in my business, I'm in more of my masculine energy, right? Because I need to direct, I need to lead, I need to be in a place that where being in my masculine energy is more productive for that purpose.
Yep.
But in another setting, right, in my relationships, that might be different, you know. And for most feminine women, operating in a masculine energy the majority of the time is absolutely exhausting. Yeah. You know, for most men, like operating in a feminine energy is going to be exhausting for them, you know. And so they get into their masculine, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all have them. It's about how do you empower people to recognize what is the healthy masculine, what is the divine masculine actually look like, feel like, and how do you teach women not to fear the masculine, you know, because there's toxicity on both sides and there's trauma on both sides. And the only thing that would lead a woman to fear the masculine is trauma. Right. Yes. So how do you heal that so that she can move on in her life in a space where she doesn't actually contribute to potentially damaging boys and men because of her own trauma, and vice versa. Right. It's the same the other way around. But, you know, if we're going to sit here and talk about how, you know, only masculinity is toxic, I think we need to have a conversation about all the ways that the immature feminine is toxic as well. I think there are more productive conversations to have, you know, but I think society has operated long enough with an active conversation on one end of the scale about how masculinity is exclusively toxic, and almost as if there were nothing toxic about the immature feminine. You know, but again, I think talking about how to show up in the divine and in the healthy realm in both contexts is probably a more productive conversation. So that's what the book is about.
I wanted to touch on that because I really will say, as a woman, I completely connect to that, because I have had really toxic experiences really from females. Like, it was one of my first bad experiences in a job in my early 20s. I had a group of women that were harassing me, and like, we don't really talk about that. And I'm not saying like, you know, that women are all bad, but see, this is what I'm saying. Like, we don't have the dialogue. Like, you know, we'll sit there and watch, you know, I'll take Real Housewives for an example on Bravo. I mean, so much toxic female behavior on that show, and they're supposedly friends, just stepping on each other, backstabbing each other, you know, and just being so ugly. And we don't even talk about that. And that's not a good representation for how to be a good sister to another sister. You know what I mean? And how to be supportive to female. So I completely agree with you. I think we're missing a whole entire conversation that we don't even discuss. Like, we're like saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, but we're not even looking. And it goes back to looking in the mirror. So how do you want to represent yourself as a woman? And I think I'd take it one more level. We could go on a whole nother show about this. We might have to have a part 2 with you.
I know we could.
I think one of the things that I have such a big problem with this as a woman, and I think women are kind of split, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of women think are on this side, and then a lot of women feel this, and then like, oh, it's almost like women are against each other if you don't say the same exact thing that she says. So it goes back to the whole like men are toxic, but then women are like, we're all women, but it's like, but except for her. And I think that's a whole nother topic that we could get into one day, because I think that to me is what is such a miscommunication too of what it is to be a woman. Women think that women are all the same if they think this. And I think that some women, you know, think they like men and women, like they don't think that there's a problem. So sometimes if you don't think that it's so awful, they're like, you know, what are you talking, you know? So I think it's such a great point that you just saw. So I don't know, maybe we'll do a part 2 one of these days, Oriana, you know?
I'd love to.
I kept you on for quite a while, but let me just ask everybody where they can find you so that they know where to find you if they want to keep their eye open for the book and follow you, or maybe, you know, check out your content and learn more about what you do. And
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, people can find me on just about any social media platform. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and my handle is Coach Oriana, no spaces. Coach Oriana, and you can find, you know, the video that we talked about with 5 things women do that turn men off. I'm going to post another one here this week about, it's actually going to be 6 things that men do that turn women off. So that's going to be posted soon. And, you know, they're not exhaustive lists, but, you know, because my community of followers is a community that's very much interested in in personal growth and relationship growth, and it's a very growth-minded community. I find that they really do, they really receive this type of content really well, and they're interested in learning more. So again, it's about supporting men's health and healing. It's about supporting women's health and healing so that you can have healthier, happier relationships, and that you can actually build a legacy on. I'm really big on legacy building. So I want people to be able to know, like, what's the foundation that I need to build a legacy on, and I'm not just talking about generational wealth or anything like that. So a lot of people think about just wealth when they think about legacy, but like your relationship patterns becomes part of your legacy.
Yeah.
People
your child and your family, and so I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, if you grow up in an abusive home, you'll probably manifest an abusive home as an adulthood. As if you grow up in a healthy home, you will probably manifest a healthy home. The chances of that you manifesting whatever it is that you grew up in is extraordinarily high. So that's what I mean. Like, this is your relationship legacy. It's a cycle. It's ancestral, right? Like it's getting passed down from generation to generation. Yeah. And if your relationship patterns and cycles from your past and your history and your parents and their parents and their parents, if it's unhealthy, you have a duty and responsibility to break the cycle and to heal it so that you don't pass that on to the next generation.
I love that. Oriana.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to tell everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sticking through the technical glitches.
Yes, thank you.
And give Oriana a follow if you like what we're talking about today. And I will be back next Monday. And this was episode 8, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode of Chicken in a Bag is over. She's got to get back to being a mom, wife, bartender, therapist, comedian, real life stuff. But you can catch more episodes of Kristen being Kristen on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Catch you next time.